I have not seen Rome in 7 years. No marble, no crowds, no shouting in the forum, only wind. The wind never stops here. It presses against the walls of our fort as if it wants to erase us. Beyond the timber palisade lies nothing but rolling hills and grey sky, the very edge of Britannia. And beyond that, lands Rome pretends do not matter. This is where I serve, where Rome ends. Our fort is small, timber and turf. Smoke leaks from the roofs because the cold never truly leaves. The mud swallows sandals. The rain rots leather faster than war ever could. We are auxiliaries, not citizens, not legionaries in polished armor. We hold the line while Rome counts taxes somewhere far to the south. You would think the edge of an empire would feel glorious. It does not. It feels forgotten. At dawn, I climb the watchtower. The hills stretch endless and empty. Sometimes I see movement, shadows where no shadows should be. The tribes beyond the frontier do not march in formation. They do not carry standards. They melt into the land. We stand in straight lines. They do not. Our orders are simple: observe, report, endure. But endurance is its own battle. Letters from home arrive months late, if they arrive at all. I once received a message from my brother describing a festival in Rome. He wrote of music, wine, and crowded streets. By the time it reached me, winter had frozen the river solid and 3 men had died from fever. We bury them outside the walls. No marble markers, no grand speeches, just names scratched into wood. If you walk through our fort at night, you will not hear talk of glory. You will hear complaints about boots that split in the rain, about cloaks too thin for northern winds, about beer rations gone sour. We have found writing tablets here, thin pieces of wood where men begged their families to send warm socks. One soldier invited a friend to his birthday celebration. Another complained that he had not been paid. This is the reality of empire, not triumph. Maintenance. We repair roads that sink into mud. We patch walls. We patrol in pairs, scanning tree lines for movement. Sometimes weeks pass without incident. Then suddenly, a raid, fast, violent, gone before reinforcements arrive. Rome calls this a frontier. To us, it feels like the world narrowing to a circle of torchlight. Yet even here, Rome insists on ritual. We drill in formation. We polish helmets that will rust again by morning. We raise the standard at sunrise as if the emperor himself were watching from across the sea. Perhaps that is the point. Even at the edge of the known world, Rome must look like Rome. But something changes in a man stationed too long at the frontier. You begin to measure time differently, not by festivals or elections, but by winters survived, by friends lost, by how long it has been since you heard your own language spoken without an accent. Sometimes I stand beyond the walls and look north. There are no monuments there, no paved roads, no marble temples. Just land that does not care who claims it, and I wonder if Rome understands what it asks of us, to hold a line drawn on a map in a city we may never see again, to represent civilization in a place that resists it, to live where Rome ends. Years from now, emperors will build walls of stone across these hills. They will declare this boundary permanent. They will say Rome has chosen wisdom over conquest. But we know the truth. Rome did not stop because it was satisfied. It stopped because this land takes more than it gives. We are not the conquerors at the edge of the empire. We are its proof of limits. I have not seen Rome in 7 years, but every morning, when I climb the tower and stare into the mist, I understand something the senators do not. Empires are not defined by the cities at their center. They are defined by the men who stand alone at their edges. And here, at the edge of the Roman world, we stand. Subscribe the channel. And don't forget to share how you felt.
I am just a grain officer in Roman Empire. That is what the word means. Frumentarius. It sounds harmless, doesn't it? A man who measures wheat. A clerk in dusty warehouses. A servant of logistics. That is what the senator thought too, until I knocked on his door at night. The street was silent when I arrived. Rome always feels different after dark. The noise fades, but the tension does not. Oil lamps flicker behind shutters. Slaves whisper. Dogs do not bark when they see my cloak. They recognize the insignia. He opened the door himself. That surprised me. Most send servants. He tried to smile when he saw me. Is there a problem with the grain shipments? I did not answer. I handed him the seal tablet. Imperial order. He did not finish reading it before his hands began to shake. You see, by my time, we were no longer counting wheat. We were counting loyalties. Officially, we still belonged to the army. The Frumentarii began as supply officers attached to legions responsible for grain distribution and transport. It was practical work. Necessary work. Empires starve before they fall. But supply lines stretch far. And men who travel far hear things. Complaints from governors. Rumors of rebellion. Soldiers grumbling about pay. Merchants bribing officials. Senators criticizing emperors behind closed doors. Information flows along roads just as grain does. At some point no one agrees exactly when emperors realized something. The men who move between provinces without suspicion are more valuable than spies. We were already everywhere. So our duties expanded. First, courier work. Carrying imperial messages across vast distances. Faster than local officials. More reliable than hired riders. Then, observation. We were instructed to report irregularities, corruption, sedition, disloyalty, quietly. By the 2nd century, our headquarters stood on the Caelian Hill in Rome, Castra Peregrina, a military camp in the heart of the capital. From there, we watched the empire. Not openly. Never openly. I have walked into provincial capitals under the pretense of auditing grain stores and left with lists of names men who spoke too boldly about taxes, about succession, about the emperor's competence. I have shared wine with governors who did not know I would report their jokes to Rome. I have stood in crowded forums pretending to bargain for barley while listening for the word revolt. We were soldiers without banners. Rome tolerated us. Then Rome began to fear us. There are few things more dangerous than a man who answers directly to the emperor. We did not report to local magistrates. We did not answer to senators. Our loyalty was vertical straight to the throne. That made us useful. It also made us hated. People lowered their voices when we entered a room. Conversations ended. Letters were burned. Some called us necessary. Others called us parasites. There were accusations of extortion, of fabricating charges, of using imperial authority for personal gain, and I will not lie to you, some did. Power, when hidden, corrodes faster. By the 3rd century, the empire was unstable. Emperors rose and fell quickly. Assassinations were no longer shocking, merely scheduled. And we, who had once served as the emperor's eyes and ears, became something else in the public imagination. Secret police, informers, tools of fear. Even emperors began to distrust us. Because if we could watch senators, we could watch them. When Diocletian came to power, he rebuilt the empire with cold efficiency. Administration restructured. Provinces reorganized. Authority clarified. And us? We were dissolved. Officially, it was reform. Unofficially, it was survival. The Frumentarii had become too visible, too resented, too powerful without accountability. In our place, he created a new corps, the agents in Rebus. Different name, similar function, cleaner structure, tighter control. But the lesson was clear. Rome could not afford an intelligence service that frightened Rome itself. I delivered my final tablet on a morning without ceremony. No arrests, no whispers, no night knock, just an order relieving me of duty. After years of listening to others, I walked home in silence. Do I regret it? Empires are not maintained by ideals. They are maintained by information. We did not invent surveillance. We perfected it. Every empire believes it must watch its people to survive. But there is a cost. When citizens begin to fear the knock at the door more than foreign enemies, something fundamental has shifted. I was a frumentarius, a grain officer, a courier, a spy, and for a time, I was the quiet shadow behind Rome's power, until Rome decided it no longer wanted to see its own reflection. Frumentary is gone, but its ideology of control hasn't. Which intelligence agency relates with Frumentary? Write in the comment box. Thank you. Like and subscribe.
The sun was already killing us before the enemy ever appeared. Heat pressed down on my helmet. Sand crept into my armor. And the silence felt wrong. We were Roman legionaries, the best army the world had ever known. We had marched across Europe, crushed kings, and bent empires to our will. So when our general said this desert march was easy, we believed him. We never saw the enemy. We only heard them, a distant thunder, drums, hooves, and then arrows fell from the sky like rain. We raised our shields. They kept coming. We charged. There was nothing to fight. And that's when I understood the truth. Rome had marched into a battlefield that could not survive. This is Carrhae, the day the desert swallowed an empire. I remember the heat first. Not the heat of Roman summer, but a heavier heat that pressed down on the body and made breathing feel slow and difficult. The Syrian sun did not feel warm. It felt punishing. We had been marching east for weeks, farther than any Roman army had ever gone. We passed the last familiar towns and the last places where Latin meant anything. Beyond that, there was only open land and silence. No one was afraid. We were Roman soldiers, and we believed Rome could not lose. I was a legionary serving under Marcus Licinius Crassus, one of the most powerful men in the Republic. He was rich beyond measure and famous for crushing the slave rebellion of Spartacus. When Crassus said this campaign would bring glory and wealth to Rome, we believed him. Our enemy was the Parthian Empire. We were told they were not real soldiers. They had no heavy infantry, no discipline, no formations, only horsemen and archers, traitors pretending to be warriors. Crassus said they had never faced Roman legions. We believed him. The land near the city of Carrhae was flat and endless. There were no hills, no trees, and no cover. Just dust, sky, and open ground. Our officers said this terrain favored Rome. They said the enemy would have nowhere to hide. That should have worried us. Instead, it reassured us. Crassus rode past the ranks, confident and calm. His armor shined in the sun. He spoke about victory and honor, about how this campaign would place his name beside Caesar and Pompey forever. Some soldiers cheered, others stayed silent. I noticed the veterans, men who had fought in Gaul and Spain. They did not celebrate. They watched the horizon carefully and held their shields tight. One of them spoke quietly near me. He said that wars do not begin like this. I did not understand what he meant. That morning, the horizon was empty. There were no banners, no formations, no enemy in sight. Then we heard a sound. It was not shouting or horns. It sounded like distant thunder. The ground began to vibrate beneath our feet. Crassus ordered the army to form up. Still, nothing was visible. The sound grew louder. Then shapes appeared on the horizon. They were moving fast, too fast. Thousands of horsemen emerged from the distance. They wore armor that covered their bodies in metal masks that reflected the sunlight. They did not slow down. They did not charge directly. They spread out. They surrounded us. That was the moment I realized something was wrong. The Parthians were not afraid. They were calm. They were not attacking. They were hunting. I thought battles were decided by courage, by discipline,
by steel against steel.
I was wrong. At Carrhae, we never even reached the enemy. The sky killed us first. No walls, no ambush, no charge, just arrows that never stopped, and an army that refused to be caught. This isn't the story of how Rome lost a battle. It's the story of how Rome learned that some enemies don't fight you, they erase you. The sky begins to kill us by midday. The heat became our first enemy. The sun pressed down on us like armor we couldn't remove. My mouth was dry. My lips were cracking. We had marched for hours across empty land, no trees, no hills, no shade, just flat desert. Then we saw them. At first, they looked like shadows on the horizon. Our Shimmerlin. Movement. Dust. Someone laughed and said, "That's it? That's the Parthian army." They weren't standing in formation. They weren't advancing. They were circling us. The sound came next. Not the clash of shields. Not shouting. Drums. Low. Slow. Endless. The ground vibrated beneath my feet as if the desert itself had a heartbeat. And then the arrows came. Not a volley. A storm. I raised my shield instinctively. The impact was unlike anything I had ever heard. A metallic rain hammering iron and flesh. An arrow plunged through the man beside me. Through his mail, through his lung, we dropped without a sound. We tried to advance. They retreated. We stopped. They circled. Every time we moved forward, they moved away. Every time we stopped, the arrows returned. They never ran out. Crassus ordered us into Testudo. Shields locked overhead. Shields locked on the sides. Normally, Testudo meant survival. Here it meant suffocation. The heat trapped inside the formation. Sweat poured into my eyes. Men gasped for air, and the arrows kept coming. They punched through shields, through armor, through men. We couldn't strike back. We couldn't even see who was killing us. That's when I realized the truth. This wasn't a battle. It was geometry. They knew the distance of their bows. They knew the speed of our legs. They knew exactly where we couldn't reach them. We were infantry in an ocean of cavalry, and the ocean was endless. Then we heard it. A new sound. Heavier. Faster. Like thunder riding the horizon. The cataphract. Armored head to toe, horse and rider fused into steel. They charged not to break us, but to scare us, to force movement, to break formation. And every time a man stumbled, the arrows found him. By sunset, the sand was dark, not from shadow, from blood. We looked for Crassus, for orders, for hope. What we found instead was silence, and the creeping understanding that the Parthians were not trying to defeat us today. They were letting time do it for them. By nightfall, we had lost thousands, and the desert still hadn't taken its turn. Thanks for watching. Subscribe. By the third day, we stopped asking how to win. We only asked how to survive. Our general believed one meeting could end it. One conversation. One promise. But in the desert, negotiations don't end wars. They end armies. And when Crassus stepped forward to talk, Rome walked with him by dawn. We were no longer an army. We were a shape in the sand. Men leaned on broken shields. Helmets lay discarded, too heavy to carry. The wounded begged us to leave them behind. The Parthians didn't attack. They didn't need to. They watched us from a distance. Riders circling like shadows, always moving, always silent. That was worse than arrows, because silence meant choice. Marcus Licinius Crassus called his officers together. His face was pale, not from fear but from understanding. This could not be won. We had chased ghosts across the desert. Our formations meant nothing. Our courage meant nothing. So Crassus chose words over swords. He sent a messenger. The Parthians agreed to meet. That should have frightened us more than arrows. I watched as Crassus mounted his horse. He didn't look like a conqueror anymore. He looked like a man bargaining with fate. We followed. Too many followed. Because Romans don't abandon their general, even when they should. The Parthian commander rode forward smiling. No armor. No urgency. They spoke. We couldn't hear the words, only the tone. Calm. Controlled. Then voices rose. Hands reached. Someone grabbed the reins. And suddenly steel flashed. I don't know who struck first. History will argue. All I know is this: in seconds, the meeting became a massacre. Crassus was dragged from his horse. His guards were cut down, and we stood frozen, watching Rome die without a battle cry. When it was over, our general was gone. Not captured. Not saved. Gone. Some say he was killed there. Some say he was mocked. Some say gold was poured down his throat. None of it mattered. What mattered was this: we had no commander, no plan, no future. The Parthians returned to their horses. The arrows began again, and this time no one pretended we could escape. We didn't lose at Carthage because we were weaker. We lost because Rome believed every war could be bought, and the desert proved that some debts are paid in blood. Thanks for your watching. Subscribe and watch other videos too.
By now, we know something is wrong. The sun is sinking. The arrows haven't stopped. And the enemy isn't getting tired. This is the moment when Rome realizes the truth. We are not fighting an army. We are fighting a system designed to kill us slowly. This is the day Roman discipline meets its breaking point. I am exhausted. Not the kind of tired you fix with rest. This is the kind that creeps into your bones, where every breath feels borrowed. The Parthians have not stopped. Their arrows fall like rain. Not in waves, not in charges, but constantly, relentlessly. Every time we raise our shields, another arrow finds a gap. Every time we advance, they retreat. Just far enough to stay safe, just close enough to keep killing. They are never where we strike. We finally understand the trick. They are not running out of arrows. Behind their lines, we see it now. Camels. Rows of them. Each one loaded with quivers. An endless supply. The sound we hear is not chaos. It is logistics. And Rome has never faced that before. Crassus orders us into formation. The testudo. Shields locked. Heads down. It's beautiful. Perfect. And useless. The arrows punch through shields. They bounce inside the formation. They hit the men we cannot move. We are protecting ourselves. By trapping ourselves. Men scream beneath the shields. Wounded men beg to be let out. But if we break formation, we die faster. Then comes the order. Cavalry forward. Publius Crassus' son leads the charge. He is young, brilliant, desperate to prove Rome still commands this battlefield. We watch him ride out. And for a moment, hope returns. The Parthians retreat. Again. Just like before. They pull Publius farther and farther away from us. We want to shout. We want to warn him. But dust, distance, and pride carry him forward. Then the Parthians stop retreating. They turn. All at once. We hear the horns. We see the encirclement. The horse archers surround Publius' cavalry like wolves. Arrows pour in. The cataphracts charge. Steel on steel. Rome fights hard. Rome fights bravely. Rome loses. And from inside our formation, we hear something worse than screaming. Silence. The Roman army breaks inside. Not outwardly, but inwardly. We are still standing. Still armed. Still disciplined. But the belief is gone. The belief that Rome always wins. The belief that command knows what it's doing. The belief that this ends well. The sun is setting now. The arrows still fall. And I realize something terrifying. This battle is not about victory anymore. It is about survival. And the Parthians are not finished with us yet. Thanks for watching. Subscribe. We'll be back with the next episode.
I am standing on Roman soil, and for the first time in my life, I know Rome has lost. Not the battle, not the day, Rome itself. Behind me lie tens of thousands of dead legionaries. Ahead of me waits an enemy that did not conquer us with strength, but with patience. This is the moment Crassus realizes the truth. You can lose everything, without ever losing a single battle. Night falls over the desert. The screaming has stopped. The arrows have stopped. The dust settles. And what remains is silence. I walk among the wounded. Men with arrows buried so deep they become part of the body. Men begging for water. Men begging to die. Crassus still lives, but his army does not. We have not been destroyed in one moment. We have been bled out slowly. At dawn, the Parthians return. Not charging, not shouting. They ride forward calmly, almost respectfully. Their general, Shurina, sends word. Let us talk. Crassus hesitates. He knows what Rome expects of him. He knows what history will do to him if he refuses. But he also knows this. If we fight again, no one survives. I watch Crassus walk forward, not as a general, not as a conqueror, but as a man carrying the weight of an empire. The Parthians smile. They offer peace. They offer safe passage. They offer terms. But this is not negotiation. This is theater. Something goes wrong. Words are exchanged. Hands are raised. Steel flashes. In the chaos, Crassus is grabbed. There is shouting. There is confusion. Then silence. When the dust clears, Crassus is dead. Rome's richest man. Rome's most powerful politician. Killed not in battle, but in a failed handshake. The Parthians do something cruel. They cut off his head. They pour molten gold into his mouth. A message. You wanted wealth. Now you have it. What remains of the Roman army retreats. Not marching, not singing, running. Those captured are not killed. They are sent east, never to return. Roman soldiers become shadows on the edge of the world. When news reaches Rome, the city freezes. No triumph, no speeches, no revenge, just fear. Rome has learned something terrible. There are enemies. You cannot intimidate. You cannot overwhelm. You cannot outspend. Carhide changes everything. Rome will never again underestimate the East. Never again assume discipline beats adaptability. Never again believe legions are invincible. Because in the desert of Carhide, Rome met a mirror and did not like what it saw. The battle is over. The dead are buried. The desert has moved on, but Rome hasn't, because some defeats don't end when the fighting stops. They follow you home. This is the story of what Carhide did to Rome, long after the arrows stopped falling. I am back in Rome now, and the city feels different. Not quieter, not weaker, afraid. The Senate does not speak of Carhide openly. There are no monuments, no public funerals, no official mourning. It is as if the battle never happened, but everyone knows. Crassus is gone, the man who balanced Caesar and Pompey, the man who held the Republic together with gold. With him dead, the triangle collapses. Power tilts. The Republic begins to crack. I walk through the streets and hear the whispers. 20,000 dead, 10,000 captured, never returned. Mothers look east when their sons leave the city. Fathers say nothing. Rome had believed something sacred, that discipline always beats chaos, that legions always adapt, that Rome always wins eventually. Carhide shattered that belief. For the first time, Rome redraws its maps. Not forward, backward. The eastern frontier hardens. Diplomats replace generals. Fear replaces confidence. Parthia is no longer a target. It is a threat. Because Carthage taught the East how to kill Romans, and Rome never truly learned how to fight back. But Carthage's greatest damage is not military, it is psychological. Rome now knows there are limits, there are borders that cannot be crossed, enemies that cannot be conquered. And once an empire learns that, it is never the same again. I look east one last time, not with hunger, not with ambition, but with respect. Because Rome did not lose at Carthage, Rome grew old. Subscribe.
The first sign was not the enemy, it was the sound. Scraping, slow, patient, rhythmic. At first we blamed rats beneath the foundations. Dura Europus had stood 4 centuries on this cliff above the Euphrates, Greek in origin, Roman in command, Syrian in soul. Traders, soldiers, priests, families. A frontier city, but alive. Rome always feels permanent, until it doesn't. I was stationed on the eastern wall in the year the Persians came, not the old Parthians we had grown used to, but the new Sassanids. More organized, more ambitious. They did not raid, they conquered. From the ramparts, the desert looks endless. Yellow horizon melting into sky. Nothing to hide an army, and yet they appeared. Standards fluttering, shields glinting, engineers already measuring the distance to our walls. We had faced sieges before. Dura was strong, thick walls, towers, supplies stored. We trusted stone. The Persians trusted time. Days turned into weeks. They built siege ramps. We answered with arrows. They brought forward engines. We repaired damage through the night. Smoke rose constantly. The desert wind carried ash across the city like black snow. Still, the walls held. Then the scraping returned. This time louder. We pressed our ears to the ground inside the tower. The earth was breathing. They were digging. Sassanid miners were tunneling beneath our defenses, aiming to collapse the wall from below. So we did what Roman soldiers are trained to do. We dug back. Countermining is not glorious. It is dark. You crawl into a narrow shaft barely wide enough for your shoulders. The air is thick. Every breath tastes of soil. Your torch flickers because there is barely enough oxygen to feed it. You swing a pick in silence, listening between blows. And then, you hear them. On the other side of the dirt. Persian miners, just feet away, clawing toward you. That is when the fear changes. Not the fear of arrows or cavalry, but the fear of being buried alive. Our officers ordered us forward. Break into their tunnel. Stop them. We widened our shaft until the earth thinned. I could hear Persian voices, low, calm, speaking a language I did not understand. We braced for combat in the dark. No formation, no shield wall, just men in a hole. When the barrier finally broke, it happened fast. Shouts, sparks, the clash of metal in a space too tight to swing properly, and then smoke. Thick, bitter, burning my throat. They had prepared something. Later, when scholars uncovered the tunnel centuries after our deaths, they found the bodies stacked near the entrance. Roman soldiers collapsed where they stood. They believed the Persians burned bitumen and sulfur, pumping toxic fumes into our shaft. The smoke did not rise. It crawled. It filled our lungs like fire. Men dropped their shields, clawed at their throats, stumbled blindly in the dark. There is no heroism in suffocation, only panic. I remember trying to retreat. The tunnel was too narrow. Bodies blocked the path. The torch fell. Darkness swallowed everything. Breathing became impossible. In that moment, Rome felt very far away. No senate, no emperor, no legions marching to relieve us. Just earth and smoke. Above ground, the siege continued. The Persians eventually breached the walls. Europas fell in the mid-3rd century, around AD 256 or 257. The city was abandoned shortly after. Not rebuilt, not reclaimed. The desert did what it always does. It covered us. Sand preserved what war destroyed. Temples remained. A synagogue with painted walls. One of the earliest known Christian house churches. Barracks, weapons, and beneath a collapsed tower, our tunnel, our last position. Europas became known as the Pompeii of the desert. Frozen in time. A Roman frontier city that shows how empire really looks at its edges, not triumphant, but vulnerable. We had believed walls would protect us, but every wall has a weakness. Sometimes the enemy does not come over it. Sometimes he comes under it. Jura was not the largest city in the empire, not the richest, not the most famous, but in its final days, it revealed something important. Rome could build roads across continents, raise fortresses in deserts, command armies of thousands. Yet even Rome could be undone by men with shovels and patience. The scraping beneath the walls was the sound of certainty collapsing. And when the smoke filled our lungs in that tunnel, we understood what every frontier soldier eventually learns. Empires look eternal from a distance. Up close, they are fragile. You think you are strong. You have lifted stones. You have wrestled in the dirt. You have marched the roads of Italy with a pack on your back and pride in your chest. You believe that is enough. It is not. The first thing they take from you is your name. On the day I joined the Legion, I stood in a line of boys pretending to be men. Farmers, bakers, sons of blacksmiths. We joked to hide our fear. Then the centurion walked past us. He did not shout. He did not need to. He looked at us the way a butcher looks at animals, not with cruelty, but with assessment. By sunset, we were no longer sons. We were recruits, and recruits are not treated like men. They stripped us of civilian clothes, shaved our beards, cut our hair, issued us identical tunics, identical belts, identical sandals. Individuality is weakness. Uniformity is strength. That is the first lesson. The second lesson is pain. Training does not begin gently. You wake before dawn. The air is cold, even in summer. You swallow hard bread. Then you march. Not 10 miles, 20, with full pack, shield, helmet, armor, tools, rations, nearly 30 kilograms pressing into your shoulders. The straps bite into your skin. Blisters bloom like flowers on your feet. If you fall behind, the vitis, the centurion's vine staff, reminds you why you cannot. Rome does not ask if you are tired. Rome asks if you can continue, and you will continue, because the man beside you is watching, because the man behind you will report you, because weakness spreads faster than disease. After marching comes drills. We do not train with real swords at first. We train with wooden ones. Twice the weight of steel. Twice the punishment. You strike a wooden post, the palace, again and again. Thrust, not slash. Thrust, not slash. Your arms burn. Your lungs tighten. Sweat blinds you. The centurion circles. Again. You stab until your shoulders tremble. Again. You stab until your hands bleed. Again. Because on the battlefield, hesitation kills the man next to you before it kills you. They teach you formation next. How to lock your shield with the man beside you. How to move as one body. How to become a wall. Individually, you are nothing. Together, you are Rome. That is the transformation. Not physical, psychological. You begin to think differently. You stop asking, can I endure this? You start asking, will I let the formation break? The Legion is not built on strength. It is built on shame. You do not want to be the one who fails. Punishments are public. A recruit who disobeys may be beaten in front of the cohort. A soldier who deserts faces execution. In older times, entire units were decimated, 1 in 10 killed by their own comrades to restore discipline. We were told those stories often, not to terrify us, to remind us, the enemy is not your greatest threat. Disorder is. Even rest is controlled. You learn how to build a camp every night. Ditch, rampart, stakes, same layout, same measurements. Whether you are in Gaul, Syria, or Britannia, Rome must look like Rome. Order in chaos, control in uncertainty, and slowly, something changes inside you. The marches become easier, the weight feels lighter, the shouting becomes background noise. You stop flinching at the crack of the vined staff. You stop thinking of quitting, because quitting would mean admitting you are not worthy of the shield. And that shield becomes everything. When I finally stood in formation as a full legionary, armor-fitted, gladius at my side, I understood the purpose of the brutality. It was not to break us. It was to rebuild us, to remove hesitation, to erase fear of exhaustion, to make obedience instinct. The battlefield rewards speed and unity. Training ensures both. By the time we faced real enemies, the chaos of war felt familiar. The noise, the pressure, the closeness of bodies. We had already suffered together. We had already endured worse than the first clash of shields. Rome's army was not unstoppable because of better weapons. It was unstoppable because of discipline carved into bone, because thousands of men had been reshaped to move as one. When you hear that Rome conquered the world, you imagine grand battles and heroic charges. You do not imagine blistered feet, bleeding palms, humiliation, endless repetition. But that is where the empire was forged, not in glory, in training grounds, in the slow destruction of ego, in the moment a man realizes he is no longer fighting for himself. He is fighting because the shield to his left must not fall. That is the brutality of Roman training. Not just pain, but transformation. And once Rome has rebuilt you in its image, there is no going back to who you were before. Subscribe.
You're 26 years old, trudging through freezing mud in the middle of Germania. Your gear weighs more than a modern suitcase, you haven't slept, and you're pretty sure the forest ahead of you is haunted. Oh, and the last time you walked this trail, 3 whole Roman legions vanished into the trees and never walked back out. But congratulations. You're still expected to build a bridge, dig a camp, and not die. Welcome to the life of Servius Felix, one of Rome's unsung workhorses, the legionary. Military medal. Who is Servius Felix? Servius wasn't born into wealth or power. He was born on a tiny farm, the kind where the goats complain louder than the neighbors. At 18, with nothing to inherit and no real options, he enlisted in the Roman army. Unlike most legionaries, who loved gambling almost as much as staying alive, Servius saved every coin he earned. He even kept his viaticum, the 3 gold coins he got the day he signed up. If fortune favors him and he survives 25 years of service, he'll walk away with land of his own. Maybe even a quiet life with the girl he left back home. But first, he has to stay alive long enough to retire. Today is what officers like to call a routine march, which is Roman for 30,000 paces, nearly 36 kilometers. Please don't collapse. Servius carries gladius, scutum, shield, 2 pila, over 20 kilograms of armor, plus a sarcina, a backpack stuffed with a shovel, saw, pickaxe, basket, rations, and anything else the Empire doesn't feel like carrying for him. After marching all day, he also gets the night shift. Watching baggage animals. Alone. In Germania. So, in case you were worried he might rest? Absolutely not. At sunrise, Servius eats a quick breakfast with the 7 men who share his tent. They come from all across the empire, Italy, Syria, Spain, young men who left everything behind to fight for Rome. Over 8 years, they've bled together, fought together, and dragged each other out of more than one nightmare. Today, they march under Germanicus, nephew of Emperor Tiberius, a commander determined to restore Roman honor. Each legion, nearly 5,000 soldiers, broken into cohorts, then into centuries, all ordered about by centurions shouting, Dex. Sin. Dex. Sin. Right. Left. Right. Left. Never the left foot first. Apparently even Rome has superstitions. Chains a tense march. Barely a year ago, legions in the region nearly mutinied over lousy pay and endless service. Only their generals' negotiation skills prevented a civil war in the cold wetlands of Germania. Now they're back in the field, not fighting, but chopping trees, building elevated roads, and laying makeshift bridges just to move forward. Germania doesn't care how disciplined you are, it will swamp you anyway. Evergreen Tree, the place no Roman wants to return to. Eventually, the legions reach a clearing at the edge of the Teutoburg forest. Servius knows the place too well. 6 years earlier, during the reign of Augustus, this forest swallowed 3 Roman legions whole. Ambushed in the rain. Narrow path. No escape. One of the worst disasters in Roman history. Servius lived through it. Barely. Now he's back, not to fight, but to bury the bones of the men he once marched beside. Every skeleton might be someone he joked with, someone he ate with, someone he watched die. He works silently. He wants to cry. But he keeps his head down and finishes the job. The empire can take the glory. All Servius wants is a little farm, a peaceful life, and the chance to marry the girl waiting back home, if the god gives him 17 more years.
Ancient Rome didn't just punish crime, it terrified people into obedience. Kill a member of your own family? Rome called it a crime against nature itself. The punishment was the penalty of the sack. You were sewn alive into leather with animals, then thrown into a river to disappear forever. Betray Rome? You were dragged to a cliff and thrown off. If the fall didn't kill you, executioners below finished the job. Break sacred vows. Vestal virgins weren't executed. They were buried alive, sealed underground with a lamp, and left to suffocate in silence. Accused of forbidden magic or dangerous beliefs, you were tied to a stake and fed to beasts in public arenas. And the most dangerous role of all? Roman emperor. Most didn't die in battle. They died by daggers in their own palaces. In Rome, law ruled the empire, but fear kept it alive. Subscribe the channel if you liked the video. Thanks for watching.
The river was supposed to swallow them. It did not. In the early dawn, when the Tiber ran swollen and wild, 2 infants drifted between reeds in a wooden basket, condemned by fear, erased by power before they could speak. Their uncle, King Aemilius, had ordered it. Prophecies are dangerous. Infants even more so. The current carried them away from execution, but the river chose differently. The basket lodged beneath a fig tree at the base of the Palatine Hill, and Rome waited. The story the Romans would later tell is simple. A she-wolf found them. She lowered her massive head, listened to their cries, and instead of tearing flesh, she gave milk. It is a powerful image, wild nature bowing before destiny. Rome was not raised in comfort. It was raised in hunger. A shepherd named Faustulus eventually took the twins in. He and his wife raised them in the rough hills overlooking the Tiber. Romulus and Remus did not grow up noble. They grew up hardened. They fought other shepherds. They stole cattle. They led small bands of young men through the fields like warlords without a kingdom. Even as boys, they carried something dangerous inside them, ambition. When the truth of their birth finally surfaced, it changed nothing about who they were. They were grandsons of Numita, the rightful king of Alba Longa. Their uncle had usurped the throne. The twins did not hesitate. They gathered allies. They stormed the city. They killed Aemilius. Power reclaimed through violence. Rome's first lesson had already been written. Authority is not restored with words. It is restored with force. After restoring their grandfather, the twins faced a decision. They could remain in safety, or they could build something new. They chose ambition. They returned to the banks of the Tiber, to the very ground where they had been abandoned, and declared their intention to found a city. But unity has limits. Romulus chose the Palatine Hill. Remus preferred the Aventine. They turned to the god for judgment. They scanned the sky for vultures, divine messengers. Remus claimed 6. Romulus claimed 12. The numbers mattered less than the pride behind them. Neither brother would yield. Because this was not a disagreement about geography. It was a battle over legacy. Romulus began building a wall around the Palatine. It was modest. Stones stacked into a boundary, a line drawn in earth. Remus laughed. He mocked the low barrier. And then, as legend records, he stepped over it. A gesture, a joke, a challenge. In that moment, something crystallized. If the wall could be crossed without consequence, it meant nothing. Romulus struck him down. Remus fell beside the unfinished boundary, and Rome was born. Not in triumph, not in celebration, but in fratricide. The first citizen of Rome died for crossing a sacred line. The Romans would wrestle with that origin for centuries. Their founder was a killer, but he was also a lawgiver. Romulus declared the walls of Rome sacred, inviolable. The state stood above the individual, even above blood. It was a brutal lesson, but it would shape everything that followed. Rome began small. It was not a city of nobles. Romulus opened its gates to exiles, criminals, fugitives, men with no past and nothing to lose. Rome did not begin pure. It began desperate, and desperation breeds innovation. But there was a problem. There were no women. Romulus invited neighboring tribes to a festival, the Sabines among them. During the celebration, Roman men seized Sabines' unmarried women and carried them into the city and married them. It was abduction. War followed. The Sabine men marched against Rome. Steel met steel. But in the midst of battle, something unexpected happened. The abducted women, now wives, stepped between the armies. They begged for peace. They refused to lose fathers and husbands in the same day. And so the enemies united. The Sabines merged with Rome. Conflict transformed into expansion. This would become Rome's pattern. Conquer, absorb, expand over time. Poets reshaped the story. They glorified the wolf. They softened the killing. Because Rome could not be accidental, it had to be destined. And destiny requires myth. The Romans did not hide their violent beginning. They enshrined it. They believed strength came from hardship, from sacrifice, from the understanding that order must be defended at any cost. Centuries later, when Roman legions marched across Gaul, when Carthage burned, when emperors ruled from marble palaces, they would look back to that hill, to that wall, to that moment when one brother chose the city over family, and they would see inevitability. But on the day Rome began, there was no inevitability. There was only a man standing beside the body of his brother, a wall of unfinished stones, wind across an empty hill. Empire was not visible yet, only belief, and belief is what built Rome. Not just stone, not just swords, but the conviction that their city was chosen, forged by God, tested by blood. Rome did not begin innocent. It began uncompromising. And from that uncompromising beginning came roads, laws, legions, and an empire that would dominate the Mediterranean world for centuries. All because a basket did not sink. All because a wall was defended. All because one line in the dirt was treated as sacred. That is how Rome began. Not with marble, not with glory, but with a boundary, and blood.
Fog on the road, not mist. Fog, so thick it swallows sound. My unit is standing still, shields lowered, boots sinking into mud that smells like rotten iron. There should be men here. The road ahead is Roman, straight, measured, built to last centuries. But it ends in nothing. No campfires, no watch calls, no banners snapping in the wind. Just trampled grass, broken wagon wheels, and a single helmet half buried in the mud, its cheek guard bent inward like it was punched by a cannonball. This was a 9th Legion road. I know because the stones are stamped with their mark. I call out. Only the crows answer. A Roman legion does not vanish, not like this. And yet, the north is silent. I remember the night before it vanished. That is the part people forget. Before the mystery, before the silence, before the empty spaces in the records, the Ninth Legion was real, loud, heavy, confident. You could hear them before you saw them, iron on leather, shields knocking, men singing old marching songs as if Britain itself would move aside. I was not one of them. I served in a Legio 14 Gemina, stationed south, tasked with holding roads and supply lines after the fires of Boudicca's revolt. We watched the Ninth march north while we stayed behind, counting wagons and broken wheels, counting the dead who never made it into songs. They joked when they passed us, called us guards, told us they'd be back before winter. That was the last time I saw their eagle. Rome likes certainty. We carve it into stone, hammer it into bronze. Victories are measured, defeats explained, names recorded. That is how an empire survives, by remembering itself. The Ninth should have been remembered. They had history. They had fought under Caesar himself in Gaul. They crossed the Channel with Claudius' invasion. They bled during Boudicca's uprising, but they endured. After that revolt, they were rebuilt, reinforced, restored. A wounded animal, yes, still dangerous. By the time I heard they were stationed in the north, around Eboracum, no one doubted them. Britain was harsh, but Rome had faced harsher lands. Or so we believed. Messages slowed first. Not stopped, slowed. A delay here. A missing courier there. We blamed roads, weather, tribes. Britain always had an excuse ready. Then the inscription stopped. That is what historians notice now. I noticed the silence first. Legions leave traces everywhere: altars, tombstones, stamp tiles, casual graffiti carved by bored soldiers. The Ninth leaves nothing after a certain point. It's as if a hand swept them off the map. No victory announcement arrived. No disaster report followed. No Senate debate. No public mourning. Rome did not even lie. It simply said nothing. We heard rumors, of course. Soldiers always do. Some said the Ninth marched too far north, into lands the Caledonians knew like wolves, no forests. Others said they were ambushed, surrounded, broken apart piece by piece until discipline meant nothing and survival meant everything. Another rumor claimed they weren't destroyed at all, that they were transferred east, swallowed by another war, renamed, dissolved quietly like a debt Rome preferred not to acknowledge. But rumors thrive where facts die. What I know is this: after the Ninth, orders changed, patrols shortened, roads ended sooner, forts grew thicker walls instead of wider gates. We stopped talking about conquering Britain. We started talking about holding it. I remember standing watch one night, rain soaking through my cloak, staring north into darkness that swallowed torchlight whole. I realized then that Rome was afraid, not panicked, not broken, but cautious in a way I had never felt before. Empires do not admit fear. They express it in architecture. Soon, engineers arrived. Surveyors paced the land with measuring rods instead of spears. Stone replaced ambition. Where once we spoke of advance, we now spoke of borders. Men whispered the Ninth's name like a prayer that had been rejected. Rome never erased the Legion officially. That would have required explanation. It simply stopped speaking their name aloud. No parades. No vengeance campaign. No public reckoning. Just absence. And absence, in an empire built on record, is the loudest sound of all. Years later, when Hadrian ordered the wall, some said it was wisdom. Others said restraint. I knew better. It was memory made stone. A line drawn where confidence ended. The Ninth Legion did not need a monument. Its disappearance was warning enough. Whatever happened to them, whether crushed beneath northern hills or scattered across forgotten battlefields, taught Rome something no victory ever had. There are lands you can conquer, and there are lands that conquer something from you in return. Rome never told us what happened to the Ninth, but after them, Rome stopped moving forward, and that tells me everything. Thanks for watching. Share your opinions in comment box and subscribe. They said the emperor was coming, not to fight, not to bleed, just to be seen, and every man in the camp understood what that meant. If Claudius crossed the sea, then Rome had already decided. Britain would fall, no matter the cost. We waited by the river. The Thames moved slowly here, brown and wide, swallowing sound. Fog rolled off the water in thick curtains, muting the world beyond a few dozen paces. Britain never revealed itself all at once. It crept forward, patient, watching. Camp was different now. No shouting, no dice games, no singing. Armor was cleaned again and again until hands cracked. Cloaks were brushed free of mud that would return by morning anyway. Centurions inspected ranks with a severity usually reserved for battle, but this was not preparation for war. It was preparation for history. Claudius was coming. Back in Rome, they laughed at him. A stammering scholar. A limping relic spared assassination only because no one thought him worth killing. The army knew those stories, but emperors are dangerous precisely because belief follows them, and belief was crossing the sea. He arrived without ceremony. No thunder, no trumpet fanfare, just ships appearing through mist, their hulls dark against the gray water. The men stood straighter without being told. Even veterans who had marched in Germania or Syria felt it, that subtle shift when power enters the room. Claudius stepped onto British soil and did not fall. That alone mattered. He wore no battlefield armor, only a general's cloak and the weight of legitimacy. Behind him came reinforcements, fresh troops, supplies, engineers, and elephants. They came last. Massive shapes emerging from the fog, chains clinking, breath steaming in the cold air. Their feet sank into the earth with each step, leaving impressions deeper than any man could. The Britons watching from the tree line did not flee. They simply stared. Rome understood spectacle. Steel wins battles. Fear wins provinces. The army moved again, not in a rush, not in chaos. This was not a raid like Caesar's, this was occupation. Each night, a camp was built, ditches cut, walls raised, roads marked out straight through land that had never known straight lines. Forests fell, shrines were bypassed or dismantled. Britain resisted quietly. Villages emptied before we arrived. Food stores burned. Scouts vanished. Every hill felt watched. Every tree seemed to lean closer. Claudius rode with the column only briefly. He did not need to see every mile, just enough to say he had been there. When we reached Camulodunum, resistance collapsed. This was the heart of southeastern Britain, capital of the Catovellani, seat of kings who had dominated their neighbors for generations. Roman artillery rolled forward. Lines formed. Diplomats followed close behind the legions. Some kings chose submission. Others were forced. Claudius accepted their surrender publicly. Names were recorded, hostages taken, oaths sworn to Rome and her emperor. It took 16 days. That was all Claudius required. When the emperor left, Britain did not cheer. It exhaled. He returned to Rome to claim a triumph, to walk beneath arches, to have his name carved into stone. Coins would be struck bearing the word Britannia as if it had always been Roman. But we stayed. And that is when the real war began. Rome did not conquer with one battle. It conquered with routines. Taxes followed roads. Laws followed taxes. Latin followed law. Markets followed roads again. Forts rose at regular intervals, timber first, then stone. Some Britons adapted. They traded with us, served as auxiliaries, learned Roman customs. Their children wore tunics instead of cloaks. Their leaders drank wine instead of mead. Others withdrew, into hills, into forests, into memory. At night, fires burned on distant ridges. Signals passed unseen. Songs were sung in languages we did not understand, but we understood their tone. They were not songs of defeat. I wrote at night when the camp quieted, about the rain that never fully stopped, about boots that never dried, about how Britain smelled peat, smoke, wet iron. I wrote about the people. They watched us differently than Gauls had. Not with hatred, not even fear, with patience, as if they believed time itself would side with them. We told ourselves this would be another province, another line on a map. That in time, Britain would forget who it had been before Rome arrived. But I saw children staring at our standards with something older than anger. I wondered what they would remember. Rome believed the conquest was complete. But conquest is not possession. Beneath the roads and laws, resentment hardened, debts accumulated, land passed from native hands to Roman veterans. Officials grew careless, confident, cruel, and somewhere among the Iceni, A queen watched Rome mistake silence for surrender. Her name was Boudica, and she was learning. Claudius had crossed the sea and returned a conqueror. Rome had planted its banner in British soil, but the island had not bowed. It was waiting.
By yonder valley green, our standard's glory seen. Oh, for the hills of home so far, beneath the distant Roman star. Though weary be this cohort's march, we bear the eagle's triumphal